Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with atbbq.com, and this is the Smoked Texas Brisket Burger. So today we're gonna be smoking up some monster half-pound brisket burgers, doing it Texas style. Salt and pepper on the outside, smoked on the offset with oak wood. We're gonna be doing some great condiments to go along with it, but the first thing we gotta do is break down this brisket and get it ground up. All right guys, so here's what we're starting with today. This is about an 18-pound choice brisket. Choice is gonna be great for what we're doing with grinding here today. You can see we've got a lot of fat on the outside. This is the flat muscle here where our slices come from. Up here on top is the point meat. That's where your burn-ins come from. We're gonna grind it all into one grind today. But before we do this, I just need to get a little bit of garlic going on the side because that's also gonna work its way into the grind. We're gonna do a whole head of roasted garlic. In order to do that, we're just gonna cut off that tip end to kind of expose all of those cloves right there. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna get this into a skillet with some oil. Gonna get some oil inside there. Get some more oil, just enough to coat the bottom of the pan. And then just over a kind of medium-low heat, closer to low, we're just gonna let that sit and roast in there covered up. All right, now back to our brisket. So just for the sake of showing you guys, I'm gonna take this brisket and cut it into the two different muscles because if you wanted to, you definitely could separate these two muscles and have a fatty grind and a lean grind, and I'll show you how that works. Basically, this point meat is sitting on top. I'm not gonna be pretty about this. If I was trimming these to cook them separately, I would take a lot more care, but really, all I wanna do is get them apart so you can see the difference between the two muscles. And that'll be a little bit easier to do if I take this side off, and then you can see where the separation happens. So I'm a little high there. Need to come right into the white in between those two muscles. We're gonna find just that sweet spot. So I'm just gonna follow the fat line to show me where these two muscles are separated. And now essentially what we have here, this is almost entirely just the flat meat with a little bit of that point on top. And I'll give you a little cross section so you can see what I'm talking about. That's your leaner meat right there. That's typically what we serve in slices. Now if we do the same cross section on the point meat, you'll see there's a lot more fat running through there. The muscle fibers look bigger, more intramuscular fat. So this would be your fattier cut, or you know, this may be coming in somewhere around like 70-30. This may be a little bit closer to like, I don't know, I'm gonna say 90-10. We're gonna land somewhere in the middle probably, especially with the extra fat on the outside, but you can kind of control that. All right, so let's start just getting these into strips that we can feed into our grinder. We're gonna be using the LEM Big Bite grinder, and I've worked with it enough to kind of know what's gonna fit down that feeder tube. So whatever you're familiar with working with, you're just gonna cut your strips accordingly. Some of these pieces are gonna be a lot more fat, and that's where you can really kind of see your fat content going up, is some of that fat that comes from the outside versus just the intramuscular fat. And a lot of times we're just taking that fat, especially check out this cube or this triangle right here at the end. If I cut into this, there's like no meat in the middle of that. And typically that's just money that we're throwing away. We're throwing in the trash, or you're saving it for a grind if you're cooking a whole brisket, but you're getting your money's worth out of doing this yourself. All right, so now we're gonna do the same thing with the point meat. Cut it into kind of slabs and then strips. Just the easiest way to kind of feed that down into the tube. Garlic's still pretty firm, but let's check the bottom. It's starting to get some browning, and that's fine. That's gonna happen. We're just gonna flip it over now so we're heating from the other direction. So we've got it all separated out now. Like I said, if you were gonna go for lean and fatty, you just keep these separated the whole time, but we're gonna grind it all together. All right, so getting the LEM Big Bite grinder set up. We've got all of our components here that have been hanging out in the freezer staying cold, because as we grind through this meat, we're going to create some friction. That friction makes heat, and that heat can start to melt the fat in your meat, which is no good. We get that knife on there, and then we're going to grind this twice. For our first grind, we're going to go more coarse. We're just going to start dropping strips down. Alternate between the point meat and the flat meat, just to make the mix a little easier. All right, that's all 18 pounds of it. So next I'm gonna grab the 4 pounds out of this mix that I wanna use for our burgers today. And the reason I'm gonna make that separate is because I wanna add some stuff to that before we grind it a second time. The rest of it, I'm just gonna grind down small, put it in bags, and stick it in the freezer. All right, so we're gonna switch out our die. We're gonna take off this larger. You can see actually here's 10 millimeters, the size on that one. We're gonna switch it out for this guy, which is a 4.5 millimeter. Kind of two ways you can go about feeding ground meat into the grinder again, and that's to either do it loosely like we're doing here, or you can just pack this thing full, but in that case you have to use a plunger, and I'd rather make it easy, so we use the plunger when we need to. So once you get that all ground up, just throw it into some zip top bags. If you don't have a vacuum sealer, that's fine. Press it nice and flat, and throw it into the freezer, and then you can pull out a couple pounds at a time. So we're back with our 4 pounds of brisket for our Texas brisket burger. This has been through the grinder once already. Before we go again, we're gonna add to it some chipotles and adobo sauce, as well as our roasted garlic. So you can see our garlic now, if we just squeeze on that, it's nice and soft. That's what we're looking to do, is just completely soften up that garlic. This oil's great, don't discard that. You can actually cook with that. You've now got garlic olive oil. So we're gonna take our roasted garlic now and just squeeze it over our brisket. Super soft now. It's just gonna work its way right into the meat. We're gonna work all these flavors right into the meat by grinding them with the meat. Now our chipotles, the actual peppers, I'm gonna take them out. Just chop them up real quick. And then that adobo sauce, we'll just drizzle that over as well. When I think of Texas, I definitely think of Tex-Mex. And when I think of Tex-Mex, I definitely think of Chili's. So that's one of the reasons that I wanted to incorporate the chipotles and adobo into the burger today. We're not gonna add any additional seasoning at this point. The rest of that will come on the outside of the burgers. All right, so we're gonna load this up on the tray and work it through one more time with that finer die. I'll tell you, I've rarely been so attracted to the smell of raw meat, but that smoky chipotle and the roasted garlic already smells so good. All right, so you can weigh these out if you like. We're doing 8-ounce burgers today, or you can just eyeball it. And we're gonna put this into 8 portions. And for now, we'll just ball them up. Kind of packing that meat together. Getting rid of any air gaps. I can tell you some of these are a little bigger, so I should have just used the scale. Looking pretty good now. So now that we've got these portioned, I'm just gonna throw them into some molds. These are actually molds I use for upside down cake, but they'll give us a nice starting point to get an even sized burger. And then we're gonna throw these into the fridge just to firm up a bit, make sure that we're not melting the fat before we get it onto the smoker. You can use any kind of ring mold you like, or just do it by hand. They don't have to sit in a mold. This is just convenient for me. So let's go ahead and get this smoker fired up. Today we are cooking on the Yoder Smoker's loaded Wichita offset. We're gonna be starting with a bed of lump charcoal for our coal base that we can then add splits of oak to for the smoke. So we're gonna load up our chimney starter with some XL lump charcoal. Throw a fire starter underneath it. We'll let it work. Charcoal's looking good, nearly red to the top, so we're gonna dump it out along the back side of our firebox. We're gonna keep this fire concentrated to the back side of the firebox so we can burn a small hot fire at all times, which gives us nice clean smoke. Rather than one big fire that we put a bunch of wood on and we have to choke the air all the way down, end up with dirty smoke. Now we'll throw a couple cold splits on here to get us started, but we want to load one up in the front of the firebox as well so that this one can warm up. That way when it's time to roll it over, it ignites immediately without creating this smoke that you're seeing right here. This is not the smoke we want to cook with, but it is okay to get started with our coal bed that way. So the burgers are chilling down, the smoker's coming up to temp, and we've got a little bit of time. So I want to put together a fun little burger topping that we call a Cowboy Coffee Bacon Jam. This starts with a pound of bacon that we're going to get diced up. We've got some onions to slice, some garlic, and then we've got these kind of braising liquids that are going to work their way into the jam, starting with black coffee, maple syrup, brown sugar, apple cider vinegar. We've got our Cattleman's Grill Smoky Chipotle Steak Seasoning, so that's got more sugar and coffee in it, and of course, a little Texas whiskey. All right, let's start with our onions. We're just gonna get these sliced about 1/4 of an inch thick. So for this slice, we're taking off the top and the bottom, and then we're gonna slice along with the lines that you see on the onion. Don't be too concerned about your cuts here. You want them to be equal, roughly, so that they cook evenly. But eventually this is all going to get broken down in the food processor for the jam. And then for the garlic, got 4 kind of medium-sized cloves here. We're just gonna crush these, get the skins off, and give them a rough chop. We don't have to go super fine with these. Again, we're gonna do a food processor later, so don't be too concerned. Just keep it all about the same size. So then we've got our bacon, and this we're just gonna slice. Again, about 1/4 of an inch. All right, so we're gonna go into our Lodge 12-inch skillet, just over kind of medium heat here. We're gonna render out the fat on our bacon, let it start to crisp up before we remove it and then cook the veggies. This bacon is crisped up now, so I'm gonna turn off the heat. We're gonna spoon the bacon out of here. This will come back here in a little bit. But for now, we need to get it out of the skillet so we can cook our onions down. And then obviously we had rendered a lot of fat out of that, and we don't need all of that to cook down our onions. So I'm gonna pour off all but a couple tablespoons. So we're gonna add those onions in now. You can see we've still got that fondant on the bottom of the pan from the bacon. That's totally fine. As this cooks, we'll kind of scrape that up. Lots of good flavor in there. So we're just gonna cook these medium heat, stirring occasionally. Just keep things moving and break them up. So we really start to soften these up. All right, our onions have been cooking down for probably about 10 minutes now. You can see how they're kind of translucent in color, softened up, starting to brown. That's what we're looking for. So at this point, we're gonna add our garlic. And this just needs to cook for a minute or 2, just until we kind of get that really raw garlic flavor out of there. At the same time, we're gonna add some seasoning. The Cattleman's Smoky Chipotle. We'll do about 2 tablespoons. And as you can see, this stuff, it's got sugar in it, it's got coffee in it, some salt, some chipotle. All flavors that are gonna go great in this bacon jam. So next we're gonna add our sugars, starting with a 1/2 cup of brown sugar and 1/2 cup of maple syrup. And then we're gonna add our liquids. Got a 1/2 cup of black coffee and a 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar. And then the final thing here, just a couple tablespoons of the TX whiskey. So this is just gonna simmer, and once it comes to a syrupy consistency, that's when we'll know it's done. All right guys, our jam's been cooking down for a good 15-20 minutes now. You can see how it's getting syrupy. When you pull through there, not much left behind. So what I'm gonna do here, we'll shut the power off. We're gonna add our bacon back. Just kind of mix it all together, and then we're gonna transfer this over to the food processor. It's just a wonderful and strange combination of scents and aromas with the coffee and the onion and the bacon. So we'll just start to pulse this. And the consistency is totally up to you. I definitely want it to have some chunks in it, some bite, so it's got some texture. We don't want to just totally puree this. That's pretty spot on for the texture. Let's have a taste. I think it's right where it needs to be. It's salty, it's sweet. It's got the tang from the vinegar, coffee, bacon. Man, it's so weird, it's so delicious. All right, we're back to our burgers now. These things have really firmed up in the fridge, which is great. We're gonna turn them out of these molds. And then we're gonna just get these seasoned up very simply today with some nice quality kosher sea salt, the Jacobson, equal parts that and the Telecherry black peppercorns, which I've ground just now. The fresher the better. Please don't go buy that big stale flaky stuff at the grocery store. I dedicate a little coffee grinder just to our spices, and that's where I've ground this up. So really simple, salt and pepper. Our burgers have this little muffin top on them, so just want to kind of reshape those. The mold's a great little start. I'm going to press in on the center a little bit, making like that divot, because as we know, when you cook a burger, it likes to balloon up. So we're going to counteract that a little bit. All right, so feel good about the shape on these patties. We're going to give them a nice, generous seasoning of the salt and pepper. Just press that in a little bit, and then we can flip these over and get the other side. Now I know this looks like a pretty generous seasoning here, but you think about this. This is a half-pound piece of meat that we've put no other seasoning into other than those peppers and that garlic, none of which have much salt in them. So think of this like it's your Texas brisket. And give it a good bit of seasoning. All right, well, the Yoder's sitting right at about 225 over here at the stack end, and that's where we're gonna be smoking our burgers. Now, since these burgers are fairly small pieces of meat at just a half pound a piece, they're gonna cook quickly. That means we need to go for a low temperature in order for these to have time to soak up some smoke flavor. So we're gonna give them about 30 to 45 minutes at about 225 degrees, and that's gonna give us time to really get the smoke flavor into these burgers. And then we're gonna finish them with a sear. So we're doing the reverse sear technique today. That sear is going to take place right in the firebox of the offset. We're gonna build up a big hot fire with this oak wood and some lump charcoal. We're gonna throw our griddle right over the top and sear them in the firebox. So we're gonna try and put these in a very indirect zone up here on the second shelf, staying away from that firebox for now. We'll close it up and let them smoke. Well, we're about 45 minutes into this smoke here. We're getting readings right around 130, which is what I'm aiming for. We want to go for a mid-rare right now on these burgers before we finish them off with the sear. So we're going to go ahead and pull these off. Now, in order for us to do this high heat sear, I'm gonna want all of the heat right here in the center. What we're gonna do is add another charcoal chimney here that's already lit. So go ahead and throw another log on, and then we're gonna slide our griddle in place. And this is the Yoder griddle. You get it just right. Fits right in there. Let's let that get super hot. All right, we've got this griddle just screaming hot now. We're gonna put our burgers down to sear. All right, it's been just about 1 minute. We're gonna go ahead and flip these burgers over. You can see they're just getting seared really nice. As soon as we flip these, we're gonna hit them with some cheese. We're gonna start with some cheddar, that sharp cheddar. And then we're gonna hit them with a nice creamy Havarti. And this is a horseradish Havarti. It's got chives worked into it. So as soon as we get that cheese on there, I'm gonna add some water. This is gonna start to steam that cheese when we close the lid. So essentially what's happening right now is we've totally closed up that fire chamber. There's nowhere for that heat and for that steam to go, which means it's gonna go back onto the burgers and melt that cheese. Not too much sear yet. Look at that, getting that skirt on the side from the cheese. These are gonna be pretty epic. All right guys, we're gonna start pulling these off. We've got good sear on both sides. We're finished probably right around medium at this point. We got that cheese skirt on there. The burgers stick together, they count as just one burger, right? And with the brisket patties piping hot, let's go ahead and build these burgers. So here on the bottom bun, if you want, you can do some mustard or some mayo. We're just gonna keep it really simple with some homemade pickles today. We've got cucumber, we've got some jalapeno, we've got some onion in here. This is a recipe I'll be happy to give you guys along with the rest of this recipe you can find on our blog, always in the link in the video description. And one of these days we'll have to just do a little video on how to make these quick pickles, but they're super easy to do. Tangy, but not too tangy. They're ready overnight. You know, obviously there's a lot of fat going on in this burger, so something with a little acidity to cut that fat is a great idea. So on top of the pickles, we're just gonna plant our big old brisket patties. And that one with the super skirt. And we'll top these off with our Cowboy Coffee Bacon Jam. So you've got that fattiness and that creaminess and the meatiness from the brisket and the burger. That creamy cheese on top. We've got the acidity of the pickles underneath. And now we've got some sweet, salty on top of these burgers. We're just building layers and layers of flavor. All right, let's check this out. Get a little cross section here. Nice. We finished this one about 135, 140 in the center, so you'll have just a little bit of pink. Man, look at that juice though. Beautiful. Oh man. So beefy. All that brisket flavor. Then I'm getting this sweetness from the bacon jam. Man, I miss me a pickle in that bite. Gotta get some of that pickle. Oh, and then this, that's your cheese skirt. That's a bonus. When you're doing that yourself, you can trust that there hasn't been any contamination along the way, and it's okay to undercook your burgers a little bit. I mean, you wouldn't buy a nice steak and cook it to 165, I hope. So why take such a great piece of meat that you've treated so well and cook it until you can't get any of that juicy pink meat in the center? And that's why we've treated these the way we did today. And the flavor shows. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out atbbq.com for all the products featured in today's video. If you enjoy the recipe, hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to atbbq.com/thesauce. All things barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.